He says we can.
Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, June 12th meeting of the Green Bay Plan Commission. What's your pleasure regarding the minutes?
Motion approved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve. Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And then next we have election of officers.
All right, so I get to take over for a moment, and what we need to do is elect a chair of the Planning Commission, per Planning Commission Rule 17. So with that, do we have any nominations for chair of the Planning Commission?
I would like to nominate Mary Beth Connor.
Okay,
And I would love to second that nomination.
all right. Do we have any other nominations for chair? Do we have any other nominations for chair? And any other nominations for chair? I'm using my fingers to make sure I got it.
3 times.
All right, with that then, we will take a vote for all those in favor of Mary Beth Connor to serve as chair of the Planning Commission, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right,
Thank you.
congratulations.
Thank you.
No one says that,
I was kind of wondering. Next, we will have the nominations for the vice chair.
I'll nominate Mr. Tim Gilbert.
Second.
We've got a nomination for Tim Gilbert for vice chair and a second. Are there any other nominations?
No, I was counting.
Oh, thank you. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Okay, all in favor of Tim Gilbert as vice chair?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. And congratulations, Tim, and I'm glad you're vice chair again.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
All right, communications, none?
Secretary.
Oh, secretary.
Oh, secretary.
Do we need to do the secretary one? Because isn't Kevin, you're the secretary, aren't you?
Keep back to work.
I believe you still have to appoint.
Okay.
I mean, you can appoint somebody else if you want.
I'd like to nominate Kevin Hawk as
Second.
secretary.
Second.
We're all eager to have Kevin do that.
So we've got a nomination and a second for Kevin Bonk as secretary. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? All in favor of Kevin Bonk as secretary?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Congratulations, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you for serving. Communications, none. Old business, item number 1, consideration with possible action on the request to approve the Belt Avenue area-wide plan.
I'm going to, we have our consultant on the phone, so assuming he's still here, we're going to bring him in. Phil, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So we have Phil from Stantec with us today in case there are any questions that come up as well. We brought this forward to you last month for initial discussion. Plan Commission wanted another meeting to kind of digest, review the plan. So we're back again today seeking approval for the request. It also went to EDA just a little bit earlier today, and they recommended approval of the plan as well. So with that, I'll open any questions you may have.
Did you have any other interest or any changes or additions or modifications?
No changes. I didn't hear back from anyone on things they needed to see changed.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I do have, first of all, just to say, this is really a fine job, and I'm so glad that we were able to get Stantec again. They served us well with University Avenue, and many of the same issues are here. It's a spotty kind of a long thoroughfare. It does not currently represent a good gateway into Green Bay, and there's very good reason to pay attention to these recommendations. And wetting development of it as a gateway into the city with the brownfields hillside block. So I was very, very pleased with this, and my thanks to the people who served on the steering committee and to those citizens who participated as well. By and large, I found this to be a really fine job. I think the 4 locations that were chosen as what we called once upon a time catalyst locations, but to catalyze the whole process were very well chosen. I like the townhomes and owner-occupied duplex idea for the residential part because that blends well with the owner-occupied single-family neighborhood close by, although my hope is that it will end up the smaller rather than the larger size there, again, just to blend in. So it's a good fit and balance. Only 2 things that come to mind. The neighborhood expressed its pride in its parks and its desire for green space. And I wasn't seeing a lot of attention to that in the development of this plan. And I'm wondering if there's some ways that you all can assure me that that attention is there, or if there's anything that might be done to increase that attention and the connection, for instance, to the Oyers, the Ken Oyers Wildlife Sanctuary that's nearby. So I guess that is a question as far as how this might develop.
Well, I'll jump in, I guess, first. In terms of like the green space stuff, I will say we kind of generally leave that side of it up to the actual zoning underneath the comp plan, which this is a comprehensive plan amendment. So we would still, through the traditional site plan and zoning process, address those green space issues with landscaping, amount of pervious coverage, all of that. This wouldn't change any of that. The conceptual plans are just kind of out there to show scale of what kind of buildings may fit. We would still have to work out any issues with parking and landscape amounts and things like that. We did ask them to at least make sure they address pedestrian connectivity within some of those catalyst sites.
Yes.
But green space would definitely, from the city standpoint, still be very important.
And if we're talking about a parking strip, that of course would be green, running the pedestrian length on the south side of Velp. And many of the concepts showed a fair amount of green because that's one of our requirements for permeable space. Some of them were greener than others, and I'm thinking particularly now about the gateway at the northwest end. There were about 4 different concept images there, one of which had a lot of building space kind of right up to the corner, and another of which with a major gas station didn't seem like the sort of thing that I would see as a gateway.
Yeah, we just tried to show kind of a variety of different uses that could fit on a site of that size.
Okay.
I know the neighbors in the community definitely wanted to see, okay, what would like a grocery store size building look? What would, the staff wanted to see, okay, what would street-oriented buildings look like?
Yes.
And the gas station with another outbuilding was just kind of another iteration of, let's look at, the different types of uses that could go on a site of this size.
And I guess that's why I rather wish that this included, as perhaps a part of its principles, a statement of desire for the new transformative sites to feature as much green as possible close to Velp, so as to emphasize that.
Phil, do you have any comments on incorporating something of that maybe into the last section of the plan where we talk about the corridor as a whole?
Well, I think we could emphasize it if that is something that you think is important. We did show on the plans that there would be landscaping and perhaps some kind of a sculptural feature at the corner that really would help visually make it a gateway. If there's, again, I would emphasize what Mark said. These are conceptual plans. We're not attempting to design in detail. And I think the other goals and principles that were noted in the plan would reinforce that we want this to be a friendlier, greener, a more welcoming place than it is today.
I love the use of the word greener in there. That has been a continuing concern of the Plan Commission. And I suspect that my co-commissioners would support that as well. It's just simply a reminder that that's what we're trying to do. Frankly, it's the gas station that worries me the most because that fits with what Velp is right now. And it's mostly about auto repair. And the only other new place that's been built on Velp in the last several years is a gas station. It's too easy.
Yeah, and, the market may not even sustain a gas station, because directly across Military, you have another one.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah.
like I said, it's more about scope of buildings. I know it says gas station convenience there, but the plans are really just trying to show the size of a building that you
Yes.
could fit there.
Yes. Okay.
And if I may, Mark and commissioners, I can appreciate the comments that wouldn't it be nice if there were something, maybe a little higher end than a gas station convenience store here. Just, a reminder, the other three corners of this intersection really don't have any housing or very much employment. You've got a cemetery across the street and a couple of other kind of commercial uses and industrial in the back. So this is not a site that really can become a part of some sort of urban fabric in the way that a site, even another quarter mile down Velp could. So there will be challenges, I think, in terms of what a developer really would build on this site. And so a gas station convenience store is one of those. It may not be the only one. Some kind of retail or restaurants could survive there too. But I would say the landscaping, the signage, the gateway feature, emphasize those pieces, and the use itself is going to have to respond to the marketplace. And at this location, it's not going to be necessarily the highest end uses that you might wish for that corridor.
I understand. Thank you. That does make sense.
That being said, Phil, I think we definitely, as Commissioner Bremer stated, could maybe emphasize a statement within the plan about, green space in general and wanting to incorporate that into our development plans.
Do you agree, Phil?
Yes,
Great.
yes, we can do that.
And do other members of the commission agree? I see a couple nods there.
Yes.
I believe that's a given. I mean, that's the way we actually plan and develop in the
Yeah.
city. And this is not going to be treated that much different, and we certainly would like to enhance it as much as we possibly can, so I see no problems with it, and I think everybody's on the same page for that.
Good. Then, the other thing that was a concern to me, in thinking about how to go about doing this plan, it looked as if the implementation would start with street amenities. And here's my concern there. I don't want us to have facades and green space and so on that are in effect false fronts with nothing else going on. If there is a way of doing those in concert with some of the transformations, or picking up the functionally necessary part, which it seems to me the metro stops really are, that would be my
Yeah,
preference.
the plan kind of tries to take a twofold approach a little bit. One of what, from the local government side, can we immediately do to help?
Yes.
And that's where it talks a little bit about the TIF district, maybe facade grant improvements, green space improvements, and then what can the private side, as redevelopment comes in with the catalyst sites.
Yeah,
So it really does kind of try to look at both aspects of it. What can we, accomplish? And that's where we had the steering committee members kind of rank priorities of what they thought could be the most impactful. And that's where we developed what you see in the plan of maybe what are some immediate things that the city could help try to facilitate. And those are the things that the steering committee helped identify.
okay, and I do appreciate that and desire along with them, something that happens fairly soon. But I think we're going out on a limb if we have a lot of good-looking stuff with no substance behind it. So I hope that that will be done in a very carefully timed way to fit whatever approaches are made by or to private developers for those transformative sites that are so key. That having been said, those are my only two concerns, and they fit very well with what's already been done, so my bravos.
Thank
And
you.
if I may, Commissioners, chime in on that point. I think you're right that you want this to be something that really has some substance and value and adds to the overall character of the neighborhood. But those don't discount the importance of aesthetic improvements to really being a catalyst to that other kind of development. People, including developers, are sensitive to what the feel of a place is. And if it looks run down and bare, then they may think, well, I'm not going to invest in that. But with just a little bit of lipstick, if you'll pardon the analogy, you can make it a place that is more attractive and could attract some of the kinds of uses that, as you say, would add some substance to it. But the fact is that most of the area within this study area will continue to be industrial in the areas behind. There just isn't a realistic chance of transforming large swaths of that into something different. There are, on these catalyst or these transformational sites, the opportunity to add some retail, maybe office uses, and in a couple places, some small amounts of residential, which would add to that. But we need to really make sure that it's a welcoming and attractive place where people are going to want to live, work, shop, etc., and that developers are going to want to put their investment into it.
And we certainly want to demonstrate to potential developers that the city is making investments in it. And that's one of the advantages of the street amenities too. But I have to grab on your lipstick idea. I don't want it to look like lipstick on a pig, folks. And that's a risk we take if we're too far out in front, ahead of development options.
No.
And if I may just pick up on that, even as we've been doing this study, there has been interest in the sites. There's been the corner site and some of the others. There's been discussion like, the city really is taking this area seriously. Let's consider it. And I know Mark has entertained calls and inquiries about these sites even before the report was done. So I think it won't be just lipstick, but it will be something that constitutes real improvement and investment in the public and visible parts of it that, as we all hope, will then bring other investments, bring more substance to the area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I don't know if there's anyone here that wants to speak to the commission about it, but maybe it's appropriate to ask.
Is there anybody here who had wanted to speak about this topic? Yes?
I live on North Locust Street.
Will you come on up, please, and state your name? Thank you.
I'm Mary Sturzo. I live at 1029 North Locust Street, and I agree with Sid over there. I think we can't jump the gun here. We have to make Velp Avenue look nicer than it is to attract the kind of businesses we want there. And I think we can't put the cart before the horse here. Green space is important. I called Madison a year ago about the disc golf course, and they said, that's funny. The man laughed. He said, we're taking baseball diamonds and we're turning them into green space. And you're taking green space and turning it into sports areas. So now we have a disc golf course back there. Across the street, we have a business, and we're both zoned residential. I'm sorry if I'm nervous. It's hard for me to back out because this business has 3 shifts of workers. It has buses that come and go into the driveway to pick people up. One side is disc golf, the other side is this business. And now they're talking about putting all these businesses at the end of the street, all these, 90 apartments, that are going to exit out on Velp Avenue, North Locust Street. And we have buses going up and down too. We can't get out now since they put in the roundabouts. How will we get out to Velp Avenue? And then we also have the people on Thomas that come out and exit on North Locust Street. There's so much involves us, the people that live on North Locust Street, especially the traffic and the safety issues with our children.
So is your concern mostly with the traffic?
Traffic, yes. And there's also a big complex at the end of Locust on the other side of a house there. I never knew it was there for years. And it seems that when you get a lot of low-income apartments, you have more trouble. You have more problems. We've seen it. We're one of the highest areas in the city of Green Bay for crime, for calls. The apartment's directly behind us in the low-income area. And Section 8 housing is very strict, but a lot of these people aren't Section 8 housing that own these landlords. So there's a lot of issues here to deal with, and my main concern is traffic and these apartments that are going on the end that's going to affect us trying to get out. It was better when we had lights because you could get out when the light turned red. But now, with the roundabouts, you just have steady traffic, and we have big trucks coming too. We dealt with the gasification plant, and now we're dealing with this. The residents, our taxpayers, they deserve a say-so in this. It seems like we don't have a lot of say-so. Amen.
Thank you. How much of the plan as it is actually going to happen, or are these ideas at this point? Are the apartments ideas at this point?
So it's all ideas. It is all 4 of the transformative opportunity sites that are listed in this plan are privately held parcels. It's going to take private investment, maybe in conjunction with some assistance from the city, but a private developer is going to have to come forward with a plan. So there is no immediate construction being taking place. And we definitely spoke to the residents, and there is definitely concern with traffic on Velp and some of the streets that feed into it. The one thing I will say is any project we deal with here through the Plan Commission, if some of these sites are developed, traffic impact studies are going to need to take place. And the best way we can address traffic concerns is through those individual proposed developments and doing the TIAs that are associated with them. But we definitely have really heard that the street in general has some traffic problems.
And then are things like apartments or gas stations or anything like that, is that something that neighbors will be noticed of? Is it something that is going to come back to this commission?
Yeah, so almost all of these sites would need some form of rezoning depending upon the use.
Okay, so typically they'd be coming back here, and notice would go out to within 200 feet?
Depending upon, a lot of these parcels are a little larger, so they may be 400 feet, but at minimum we'd be looking at the 200 feet.
Okay.
And is the residential idea, particularly the one as a transformative site, is that one of the places that would need to be rezoned?
To be residential, a multifamily residential,
Yeah.
whether that be like townhomes, duplexes, anything of that nature, that would require rezoning from what it is today.
Her comments, however, are exactly why I'm more in favor of the smaller development with the townhouses than the larger development of 70 to 90 units.
Yep.
The townhouse development, I think, was up to 16, 20, 30 units, basically, so it's significantly smaller.
Now, will this come back as a whole again, or will this come back in pieces at this point?
It would come back if a single development was proposed.
Okay, And then will there be more opportunities for the public to have a voice?
Yeah, it would be our standard process for development. Yeah, this is just looking at kind of the comprehensive plan of what the vision for the overall area would be.
I think the important thing for residents in the area to understand is that, this is a vision for what could be done on the street, but there's nothing specific at this point, so you have to stay involved. I know it's a challenge sometimes to keep up with, everything that's proposed, but it really is important to stay involved when things are proposed, if there are concerns, to bring them forward. And, we always try to listen to concerns from the public. I know that may not be all the answer, but, the city wants to put some attention on this street, and improving this street. This is the vision, and if you look at the impressions, the words that people use that were on this committee, talking about how now it's dingy, it's unattractive, it's dirty, it's unsafe, and what they wanted to get to is something that's attractive, that's green, that's beautiful, accessible, inviting. So, I think what we're really asked to do here in improving the plan tonight is kind of buy into the vision that we can do better, we can improve Ralph Avenue. And these are the sort of things that we'd like to see. And I can tell you, it doesn't happen overnight, but if you got one really positive development, it can spur some really good things on the street. We found that on University Avenue, and I think we can find it here as well. And, it certainly is true that having a plan and a vision does send a message to people that are looking to develop in the city of Green Bay that, hey, this is an area that has some potential. And, here are the challenges, but also here are the assets. And I think there are a lot of assets in that area. So that's what we're trying to do tonight.
Thank you,
Also, keep in mind that although the city would like to see adult change soon, a lot of, if not all of these developments could take 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years to take place. So, like Dave said, it's just a conceptual thing at this point. Could be many years before some of these come to fruition.
Thank you. Do we have any other discussion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve this recommendation.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve. Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And then this will go to City Council
Next Tuesday at 7 p.m.
next Tuesday at 7. Thank
June
you.
20th.
And I'm just going to let Phil go quick. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Phil.
Okay, and Mark, you and I will compare notes on the planning commission's recommended changes, and we can pass that on to the city council.
Yep, we'll touch base tomorrow.
Very good. Thanks very much, all.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, Commissioner Bremer, for very thoughtful input.
Oh, thanks for the extra time, I really appreciated it. It's a good report.
Okay, new business, item number 2. Consideration with possible action on the request by Alderman Andy Nicholson to review the ordinance that deals with how many people can live in a dwelling per square foot with possible action.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, we can't give you much insight into that. The zoning code doesn't offer much guidance, so we've asked the city attorney to stop in tonight to address some questions regarding this. So Vanessa's here tonight if you want to listen from her.
Thank you.
Thanks, members of the commission. So there are a couple of things regarding this request to keep in mind. So as far as the actual numbers that you want to attach to stuff, that is entirely within your legislative authority. However, there are a couple things that that have been prescribed by the courts that we have to be cognizant of. The first is, there is a standard that FHA has imposed that says that if any time we are going to do anything with housing, it has to ensure that there's no discriminatory effect, no discriminatory purpose. And so the only exception they have identified to that is the number of people that you can put into a home. So anything that's based on a number exclusively is okay. So there are two things that they've looked at to determine when that actually happens. The first is, you'll notice in the zoning code, there's a provision that states you can't have in a single-family residence, you can only have a single family living there. And then it describes the family as anybody related by marriage, by blood, by adoption, and then there's a limitation on the number of unrelated persons. Now, even though it says there's a number of unrelated persons, the courts have decided that that does not actually qualify as a limitation based exclusively on number, meaning that that cannot have a discriminatory effect. In fact, they've actually said in the case of people who have some kind of disability, or in the case of group homes treating alcoholism or drug abuse recovery, that you still have to consider whether or not there's a reasonable accommodation that can be made. The other one that happens is limitations based on the number of people who can live there based on square footage, based on the size of the home. Now those ones, that's appropriate, and you can actually have a discriminatory effect, meaning that certain people, if you can't realistically put more people into that house, even though you need to accommodate that person's disability, you can't do it. It just would create a potential hazard, essentially. And so those are the two issues that we have to look at. Now, the other thing that came up at the council meeting, to my recollection, was the enforcement. One of the things that has been in question is whether or not we can just go and do inspections. Now, yes, we can always go and ask people to voluntarily submit themselves to an inspection, but they have the right to refuse. And absent their authority, that requires an administrative warrant. The Fourth Amendment applies anytime we're going to go into somebody's home, so we actually have to go to a court and get a warrant. The standard's a little bit different, but we still do have to go get that. Now, what we actually would need to be getting, of course, we can go over that, and I can meet with staff so we can identify the standards we're going to start using and all that. But really, what the question was, as far as my understanding, is whether or not we need to be looking at those numbers for how many people or how many square footage should be attributed to a person. My understanding from talking to staff is that those numbers are appropriate, and so it's just an issue at this point of whether or not we want to change anything. So with that, I leave it to you all.
So are you saying that there already are numbers in place that are
Correct.
appropriate?
Correct. So in the housing code.
Yeah, they weren't in our briefing.
Under Chapter 23 of the Housing Code, it actually states that it's 2322, the minimum space use and location requirement. Now, there is a statement that dwelling units have to be accompanied or occupied by one family, but then it has minimum floor area for dwelling unit, and it has 150 square feet of floor space for the first occupant, and at least 100 additional square feet of floor space for every additional occupant. And then it goes into minimum floor areas for sleeping purposes, and so on and so forth. I'm obviously not qualified to tell you whether or not those numbers are appropriate, so I defer to staff on those.
My understanding, and looking at this years ago, this seems and keeps coming up from time to time, is that a lot of those standards are based on state codes, state building codes. That, excuse me, that a certain amount of space is required for air circulation and that type of thing for residents. And I believe that's the case. Do we know that?
Correct.
That it
Under
follows
the
state
UDC, the Uniform Dwelling Code, there is not that standard, but there could be other state standards. So the section that Vanessa was referring to is Chapter 23, that's the housing section. So our department enforces that section, not necessarily the planners, but our housing and zoning inspectors enforce that. And have made inspections, like Vanessa mentioned, about occupancy and capacity in homes.
Will you finish? Is there a problem that has come up that this is addressing?
Well, We had a gentleman at our plan commission a couple of meetings ago that was talking about cars, too many cars parked on properties on a particular street on the east side. And basically, in the discussion, the individual stated he felt that there were too many people living at those houses, which generated too many cars. And that's what generated Alderman Nicholson's request.
For this review, okay.
for that.
And can that be addressed specifically with the number of cars? And
You almost have the two different issues, I guess. One is inside the structure with the occupancy, the other one is the parking issue. So I don't know if they're necessarily related, but I mean, we do enforce parking standards from the zoning code. The housing code, our staff, again, doesn't necessarily enforce that directly.
And one of the issues that has come up is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but people were saying that it's an issue not only of people, of adults living there, but once you have a teenage driver, then you have those teenagers with their cars on the place. So it's not necessarily always going to be people overcrowding, it may just be kids growing up.
that makes sense. And then it says here too that the regulation of capacity and occupancy of a home is tied to the term family is defined in the code. And family is a group of 2 or more persons related by blood, marriage, adoption, foster care arrangement, living together. So I don't know that we can regulate how big a family is.
Correct.
Either. Right.
Correct.
Yeah, I think it's, we're walking a pretty fine line there.
Yes, so
That's
as far
great.
as that one goes, I really wouldn't recommend touching our definition of family. I think that it's already, I think it's pretty good as is. Instead, we'd be looking at the numbers, how much square footage per person, and keep in mind that that means that you need that square footage for, I think there's a limitation on how small it can be for kids too, but then as they grow up, they're gonna need more square footage, so you might be sizing people out of their homes as their kids grow as well.
So dealing with the family issue would open up issues of cultural discrimination, I would assume, in how family gets enacted in different cultural groups. But dealing with the safety issues, which is the amount of square footage per person, is allowable.
So the reason we can't touch that family is it has the potential to be discriminatory.
Yeah.
It's usually seen in the sense of the number of unrelated persons. That's the one that usually gets people into trouble because they want to limit how many can be in there.
Yeah.
But when you get into identifying people have to be related by this number, or then you're saying people who have 5 kids can't live there, or if they want to bring a grandparent in, they can't live there. Or if you want to limit the type of familial relationships, those have been struck down. So you can't say that a grandparent can't live with their grandchild.
Right. And my point actually wasn't to change that definition. It was basically to say that if there's a home where there seem to be a lot of people living and they're all family, then there's a home where there are a lot of people and they're all family. I don't.
Period.
Right. That's
Right.
just the way it is.
It is what it is, yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of places like that.
I guess I don't see any reason why we would change at this point. Inspectors go in and they inspect properties, and this is the kind of thing that they pay attention to. So, if there's an issue and they get a call on it, they'll go in and inspect. So I think it should be, it's probably already complaint-driven as it is. I don't see why we wouldn't just continue it to be complaint-driven with issues as they arise.
And perhaps one of the things we can do is identify the type of information we need included in those complaints, because we do have to support a warrant when we go and ask for that, and maybe educating people as to what information they need to be providing, so that we can take that to a judge to receive the warrant, maybe one way of dealing with it.
How do we enforce the clause that we have in place? Is this actually a rule, a law, ordinance, or it just refers back to the housing code? And is the housing code really ordinances?
Yes.
Okay, so nothing's gonna happen unless there's a complaint. So that sets the pace for this whole thing.
Correct. If
If
something,
there's a complaint, they're gonna go there, otherwise nobody's gonna go there, nobody's gonna check it. They can have cars all over the place, they can have 50 people living in this house, as long as they don't bother anybody. So, And yeah, you can't regulate the family. There's some big families out there nowadays. Yeah, it's just, and I guess my other question is, has anybody talked to the alderman? Is he happy with what we have come up with the contents of what's in here? And where is he? I didn't see.
I talked to him late today, he's coming back from up north. He wasn't sure if he could make it or not, but he didn't have any other input beyond that.
Did you share all this knowledge with him, and was he happy with the results, or is he gonna bring this now to the city council and spend half the night on it?
I think that would be a discussion for the city council, right? There's only so much we can offer as staff. Again, from the zoning code perspective, we weren't recommending changes. We can alert him to chapter 23, where it is stipulated requirements, and I think that addresses his request as I see it.
I've got an interesting circumstance to share with you. When I was an alderman, I had one of these houses, and it was close to UWGB. The whole swimming team lived in this house. I'll never forget that as long as I live. I'm knocking on the door, this cute little gal comes to the door and says, "Hi, who are you?" And I said, "I'm your alderman." She said, "Oh, I'll bet you've heard about us." And I said, "Yes, I have." And she says, "What are you going to do about it?" Yeah. Okay, thanks. Nice meeting you. Yeah, so they're out there, especially around colleges and schools. I mean, there are bigger groups and groups of people living in homes that actually violate the family type thing. So, but again, unless there's just a horrible, horrible circumstance or something going on and people are complaining, nobody's gonna touch it. So I agree with the lady down there who said that there's no reason to really change something because I think we've done as much as we already have that's in there.
So do we need to take any action on this?
Yes.
I move that we affirm the recommendation that there be no
Thank you.
change to the ordinance.
Second.
We've got a motion, a second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Item number 3, consideration with possible action on the referral from the Improvement and Services Committee regarding the request of Alderman Tom Slater to discuss the creation of an ordinance limiting the height of property line hedges to the same height as property line fences.
Think of Madam Chair, this is a request for a text amendment to include hedges in our enforcement of fences and walls. The request came in and was asked why we don't regulate hedges, and I wasn't sure. We don't really have a clear reason why, but we've drafted some language and put it together. This is 521 that has fences and walls. We simply added hedges here to address the request. This is very similar to other communities. They do enforce or do require hedges be the same as fences and walls. So it's not uncommon to have that. However, with our staff, we've recently discussed possibly not including hedges. The challenge would be enforcement. And what is a hedge? When was it planted? And so forth. So at this point, even though our recommendation is to approve this draft language, we are suggesting not to approve the language and just no change to the ordinance at this point.
Say that again,
So you've
Paul?
changed your mind?
We've changed our mind.
Okay.
So last thing, just
Okay.
to follow up on what Mr. Gruber saying, I think one of the things in talking with our housing enforcement staff, while we agree in terms of, making sure like fences and walls, hedges stay out of the right of way, so there's, clear passage, and then don't spill over onto neighboring properties, that it's staying within. The difficult part in terms of the height, especially with living vegetation, is determining when that was planted.
Yes.
Because if this ordinance goes into effect this year, right now, basically it becomes effective as of, let's just say, 1/1 of August. So in terms of, following up on a complaint, somebody could say, well, I had that planted there for X amount of years or before that. So I think that was one of the difficulties in moving forward with that. If the planning commission or council decides to adopt it, and add the changes. I just wanted to kind of temper expectations in terms of, with our attorney and trying to prove a case of when it was. That could be a difficult battle of trying to enforce that particular piece of it. So I think that's just to kind of follow up on, and after further discussion about this between planning staff and enforcement staff, where we came to that. But I think Alderman is here, I mean, if you wanted to discuss a little bit more about his perspective and then how this came here, I think your meeting, so in terms of, I want to address that.
And thank you, because that was my next question, was what was the purpose of bringing it up?
May I address the commission?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
I was contacted by a constituent on this matter, and as is the case, anytime I get a contact from a constituent about a physical condition, I ask if I can come out and take a look. So I went out and went out to her house and took a look, and she's here with me tonight. She'd be happy to address the commission and tell you what impact this has on her. But I was surprised when I got out there and saw what I saw. Her neighbor has basically planted privet-style hedges, so I'm not talking about trees. I'm talking about hedges where you have, multiple shoots coming right up out of the ground along the entire lot line, and these are now, I would estimate, 9 to 10 feet high. And so they've never been trimmed. And I asked myself, well, why do we regulate the height of fences? I believe we do that because we don't want our neighborhoods to become caverns. I mean, if you had 15-foot fences around every yard, those yards would become caverns. I mean, not only would that hurt the nature of the neighborhood, but I believe even when it gets high enough, like these hedges have become, it impedes the amount of light that comes in. And so my constituent certainly has some limitations in terms of cultivating grass or flowers or something in the area right to the north of that hedge. And this is on an east-west boundary, so she lives to the north of the hedge. And so it made sense to me, if I think about why we regulate the height of fences, that we would do the same for hedges. And as I said, she's here. If you'd like to hear from her, I'm sure she'd be happy to address you. But I'm disappointed to hear that the staff has changed its mind on this. I think there's logic for not having, basically vegetation walls that go 10 feet high along the side of somebody's property. And if that creates some enforcement difficulties, then we need to face those. But I think we should have an ordinance that says that's improper. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Berman.
If I could ask you a question regarding the particular hedge that has brought this forward. Okay, it hasn't been trimmed, so it's up 9 or 10 feet. What's happened to how far it encroaches or doesn't encroach as far as width is concerned?
I don't know the exact answer to that, but I would estimate from looking at it that it also is getting wide enough that it is starting to encroach. But I also know that we already have an ordinance that says that it can't encroach.
Right.
My interest at this point is doing something about the elevation.
Okay, I understand. So we could solve the width encroachment by a process of complaint and having the person correct that encroachment, trim the hedge down, but it would still leave the height and the shadow.
I believe so, yes.
So the question, the issue that was raised by the planning staff was, how do you define a hedge? And I can understand the privet, very few people would object to the notion that a privet is a hedge, that a series of privets. I'm thinking in my own yard, we've got 2 very bushy, very uncontrolled lilac bushes right next to each other. And would that be considered a hedge? Maybe if we wanted to go forward with something like this, we would need to say what a hedge is. Because I've seen an awful lot of lilacs along lot lines, and they improve the look of the neighborhood.
And I can understand
But that really high privet, I agree with you. I mean, looking just at the pictures up on the board there.
And I understand that. I think some definition would be necessary.
Yeah.
And maybe it could be defined by the length of it or something? I don't
Or the
know.
number of rooted stems and how far apart from one another they were over a length, that might also have some impact. I appreciate you bringing this forward, though, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes?
I think the secret is in just maybe a simple couple of words. Those are maintained hedges. Just that word. Maintain your hedges, keep them in your own properties. And if you maintain a hedge, if that thing gets up like over 8 feet, it's not gonna be maintainable anymore. So I think got both cases right there. Again, though, what I find disturbing here is we have not come up with anything to help you as an alderman. We just put hedges in there, and it hasn't covered nothing. I mean,
Well, it does, just putting hedges in there does cap the height.
yeah,
It says that it can't be over 6 feet because that's what
that would
fences
help, I
are.
guess.
Yes, it would.
Well,
Yes, Alderman?
We had a discussion a few months back at the Improvement and Services Committee about the same issue, and, you know, the one thing that came to my mind when I read all this was just what's been talked about here, what is a hedge? And to give you a couple of examples, I have a couple places in my district where people have cedar trees planted, a row of cedar trees along the lot line. And obviously, those things start out small, but they might be 10, 12 feet high when they or higher when they get big. And so is that a hedge? It's a number of trees that have been planted side by side to create a barrier. So, you know, do we regulate that or don't we? Yeah, I do think it may deserve some more investigation. Maybe some of the other communities have a definition of hedge. Maybe our forester has some kind of a definition of hedge.
Well, we didn't include hedge as a definition because I think we just use a common term, hedge. This is from Webster, fence or boundary form of closely growing bushes or shrubs. There's a difference between a shrub and a bush and a tree. So hedges, I think, in my mind, are a shrub or a bush. We don't regulate the heights of trees.
You know, also the grandfathering, what is there right now is a little bit problematic because does that mean if it's over that height right now it's grandfathered, or if it's planted there right now it's grandfathered?
Well, a solution to that would be don't grandfather.
Don't grandfather, no.
otherwise, it don't help you at all.
Got
You're
that
done,
right.
dead in the water regardless.
But again, we have the problem then of what is a hedge, because we have lilac bushes in a row, and our neighbor has beautiful magnolias in a row, and those are all taller than, well, ours aren't yet, but hers are all taller than 6 feet, and I can't imagine that we would be asking people to cut their trees down, and
Well, I think in the
Cut the
case
lilacs
of, in the
down.
case of magnolias, that's definitely a tree, it's got a trunk. Now,
Magnolias can also be
now,
a shrub though.
the point that you raised earlier though about lilacs, that is more of a shrub, so that would require probably more definitional work.
Or maintenance that would cut back any of the extra upshoots down to one trunk. Because it could be a tree.
but do we really want to regulate that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And there are a lot of shrubs, like magnolias, for example, can be a tree, but for the most part, they're shrubs. The natural form is a shrub. As far as the cedars, the emerald cedars or the home shrub, they can get 15 to 20 feet tall.
Yeah.
Right.
And where, like these hedges, you can trim these, boxwoods, privets, yews, they can be trimmed and sculpted very easily. But a cedar or an arborvitae, they can't be. You chop the top off and it's ruined. It's it, you know. So, you know, when you talk about a hedge, you know, it depends what it is. You know, sometimes it can be trimmed or sculptured, sometimes it can't.
Yeah.
Lilacs, not so easily. Arborvitaes, not so easily.
What about an
So-
old one of these? Can they be trimmed?
Depends what it's out of. If it's boxwoods or yews or privets or any other alpine currants or something like that, they can be trimmed and sculpted very easily.
Would it be possible to ask the neighbor to trim their hedge?
That's been done,
Oh, and they refuse?
correct. In fact, they have the sort of hedge that I described, this neighbor has on all 3 lot lines. They are growing a cavern.
Yes, Jake?
Me first. I think the definition of hedge is probably the thing that's sticking out to me most, because if, say we made this move, I can see it slipping into an area where we start trying to define other types of vegetation, as Tim was talking about, because you named 4 or 5 things I've never heard of that are all sorts of different types that people could be growing, having. It starts with a hedge, but I mean, like you said, the cedars. My grandparents had a row on their back covering the alley, specifically for the reason to try to clean the alley. So to me, this is sounding like something like that could be included, even though it's not necessarily a hedge. Somebody could come forward and say, hey, it's kind of the same premise on that. So I think that's very sticky with the verbiage that's in there. A question for staff, maybe, is there any way it could be, on a complaint basis, maybe done under maintenance or some other way that we wouldn't have to regulate, but just kind of what Jerry was talking about? Is there a different way it could be handled?
Good question, I'm not sure. Vertically, right now, no, but horizontally, yes. So there is a provision that talks about hedges having to be trimmed from the lot lines. That's the horizontal. The vertical, I don't know how we would tackle that, I guess. That's more of a challenge. That's the challenge we're kind of up against. So we kind of went back and forth as a staff here about, well, should we consider approving this? But we could also consider denying it. It's very difficult from an enforcement standpoint to, find the best avenue.
Well, your 8 feet makes it a hedge.
I mean, I think unless there's an
Could be very easily
life
over-
safety
over
issue,
that.
posed by the hedge itself. And then maybe just, if I could ask a question, our city attorney, in terms of, let's say, all right, we would pass this, city council does pass this in terms of limiting the height. How would that impact a situation like this of somebody who already has a hedge over 8 feet? In terms of where that fits in our ability to enforce, given one, the hedge is already existing, but 2, I mean, the hedge is also continuing to grow. So
there's 2 things that I see as a potential issue. Well, okay, so the first is there has to be an established definition, because once we get into, especially anything we have to do with plants, we have to establish which ones we're talking about. So like our noxious weeds, we talk about specific ones, and then we talk about the generic, anything that causes a nuisance to the city. And then whenever we talk about our nuisance trees, again, it's something that causes that life safety issue. So we have to put some parameters around it in order to be able to regulate it. The second component, as far as grandfathering them in, usually we have an issue with those whenever we have vested property rights. So if there is potential that it creates additional value to the property, then at that point it's difficult to tell somebody that they can't keep that. They can't keep what they currently have. I don't know if that would bestow any value on the property, or if it's something that we could start regulating immediately. Again, I'm just not qualified to make that determination, so we'd have to find out from somebody else whether or not that is something that we have to be concerned about. And then the perpetually growing. Again, that goes back to that whole noxious weeds and the public nuisance. So as far as things when they continue, once they get to the point of no longer being safe, is when we tend to regulate them as far as things that grow. This is kind of different, so we're trying to regulate not only them as a growing entity, but also as what we normally do for a permanent structure. So it does seem like we need to take a different approach. I don't know that necessarily shoving it into the definition, just classifying hedges is something that needs to be, in theory that works, but it almost seems like we need to do some kind of carve out for it so we can address that maintenance issue. Because if we have little twigs sticking up, I don't think anybody's going to complain. It's when the growth actually gets too high. And we would be basing it completely on what's the height. So if you have that one little twig, there's a potential for a citation to be issued.
I think for consistency in the code, that's what other communities have done. It's just easy to fit it in with fences and walls.
Yeah.
The challenge is how they enforce it. Every community might be a little bit different, so.
And if we already know it's going to be an issue, then we would want to be proactive and start identifying that now, which is why I would recommend it. But I agree with you, that's. I think it is something we should continue to look at if we're not ready to make a decision on it today.
And, Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'm also thinking that, and Paul, you mentioned maintenance before. Seems to me that in many ways is the key issue, because at one point, there was reference to a hedge being overgrown, which means not maintained. And I wonder if there's some way of tying particular kinds of hedges to what, for instance, nurseries identify as the height to which it will grow, and having the objections possible when that height has been exceeded so that it is overgrown and therefore not properly maintained. I'm just throwing that out because I do think it sounds like we need to have you guys do some more work on this. I would like to hear from the resident also who began this whole process, and thank you for doing that.
Thank you. And
I agree. I think we have to give this a little bit more thought. I think that the definition of what we're talking about, like honeysuckle bushes are horrible bush. You see them growing wild, you see people planting them. And there's going to be some things that people just don't want. There's going to be some people that just don't, they shouldn't be growing these things. However, in this instance here, I think the reason I would say is we got to give this more work is we cannot hang our hat on it will not be retroactive, because this does not do a thing for the problem that we're trying to solve tonight. So somehow that's got to be taken care of. That's got to be taken care of up front. Otherwise, you're leaving here with empty pockets.
Yeah, I don't want to create something that will become an enforcement nightmare for our staff.
Well, that's
You
true,
know,
too, but yeah.
That's always kind of an issue there. I haven't read it in a while, I'll be honest with you, but we had a weed ordinance years ago on the books that talked about obnoxious weeds, certain obnoxious weeds, and then it said, or unsightly growth, something like that. Well, that became a nightmare too, because, you know, one resident's view of what is an unsightly growth may conflict with the neighbor's view of what is unsightly. So I, wouldn't want to get into a situation where we have to, have somebody look at it and, say it looks good or it doesn't,
That's a personal opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's one person's dream is another person's nightmare. Sometimes it's even a park.
I don't think I can vote on it as it is. It's not fair enough. So I don't know what our options are.
Well, we've changed our recommendation, so
Right.
from
Well,
our
and I-
perspective, we'd like to see no change.
Right.
we would like to hear from the resident.
I would move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Thank you. Can I go on? Yes, please do. And then we need you to state your name.
Hi, I'm Diane Weedy, and I live on the southwest side of Green Bay. And I had been here, I think it was in November or December, whenever that meeting was. And I produced a copy of the ordinance that I think Madison had, and they also limited their hedges to their fence heights. And I know there was a lot of talk about like flowering shrubs and things like that, but I'm talking about something like that goes, it encases a property like a fence. It's not like, a few shrubs here or there. And yesterday I took a picture out of my bedroom window just to kind of give you an idea. The neighbor had just put in one of those sheds that you buy, like at Home Depot or something, where you just put it together. And I'm thinking those are about 7 feet high at the peak.
Oh my gosh.
And that's a 2-story duplex behind there that you're seeing. That's what I see when I look out of my bedroom window. So anyway,
That's terrible.
you know, she told me I could trim whatever I want that's hanging over, and I've been doing that, you know. And I'm tall, so, I mean, it's a hazard for me. I mean, I can't cut the top, even, you know, I can only cut how far I can reach up, and then after that, then it's still overgrowing on my property. It looks ridiculous. But I guess unless you live next to something like that, and the weird part is that they don't clean, you know, in between the hedges either. So there's cottonwoods growing, you know, there's all kinds of leaves and debris. And they told me that enhances my property. Well, I take really, you know, a lot of pride in my property, and I have a lot of curb appeal. It's a nice neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it detracts from my property. I actually pay $1,000 more in property taxes than any of my surrounding neighbors because my house, I think, is about 300 square feet larger. But it detracts from my property. And there's really no reason for it, you know. And I just think if Madison can do it, I don't know how they regulate it, you know, but that is what it should look like if it's taken care of. Because that is, you know, but that is the overgrown version of that.
Yes.
And those, when they plant them, they're like just inches apart, you know. It's not like when you buy a shrub at a nursery and they tell you, you know, you have to space it so many feet apart because it's going to grow big. Hedges are meant to, you know, have like a line of demarcation. So that was just, you know, the other thing I wanted to bring up was this new page that lists the walls and hedges now. Well, the last time I was here, this is the old page, and it actually had the wording in there. I don't know if, number 3. So the word hedges was actually under that fencing ordinance.
Yeah.
It doesn't say anything about the height, but the fact that the word hedge must have concerned somebody to put it in there. But it does say that it should be trimmed and confined to the property.
Do we know what kind of plants those are that are your neighbor's property growing there?
Do I know
Yeah,
what the name of it is?
what they are?
No, I don't.
Okay.
They do have some heights mentioned in here, though. I don't know what they're referring to. It does say maximum height 8 feet side yard and maximum height 6 feet rest of the yard.
I've heard
And
cases
maximum
where.
height 6 feet rear yard.
See, that's the old,
And actually, this is the same copy we have it on.
Right.
Right.
Scripted.
I've heard cases where, you know, on a corner lot, the hedges are too high, that they obstruct visibility and that kind of thing. And because of that public purpose, the city orders them down. It's like a public nuisance, I guess, is what you call it.
That's what it is.
Or when they grow up through a porch or something.
That one there, we make it less because it's a visual issue.
Usually that's the fence, I don't know.
Boy, what you showed us in that photograph, it's not a hedge, it's a mess.
it is, and that's what I see every morning when I pull up the shades on my window. But, you know, I don't really know what else to say other than, you know, I just think if people are putting up a live fence is what it looks like,
It's a living fence.
a living fence, then, you know, they should have some height restrictions. I mean, I don't know how much higher that, I'm trying to think when they planted those. I want to say maybe 9 years ago. And they're still growing. I mean, that is amazing. And, yeah, I don't know. I just thought I would share that picture, because that's basically what they don't trim the sides, the top, it's just
Thank you.
there. And they're two, they just both retired like I did. And to me, I always think, when you retire, you want to have things that are maintenance free, I don't know. But anyway, thank you for your consideration.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much for sharing this. Yes, Commissioner?
So I would think that our ordinances should have some basis for correcting this kind of situation. And with that in mind, I would like to move that we refer this back to the staff for further work.
Yeah, and then maybe a conversation with Madison, just to see how they enforce it and what is allowed and what isn't. If that's an example that we can draw from, let's try to gather a little information there. I kind of agree that, to just ignore this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't think any one of us would want to have a neighbor that has overgrowth to that extent. And so,
Time we want to get it right.
yeah, I think we do want to get it right.
And maybe it's a particular kind of plant or something like that.
There's things in here like, we've got hedges shall be trimmed or confined to the property in which they are planted. That's very important. That's important information that should definitely be in here.
It's already there.
The other thing that bothers me is that not being retroactive, I came up with an idea, I don't know, could this be overridden by going to claiming a hardship? Going to the Board of Appeals, like in this case, would that help with that?
To allow it to grow higher?
Huh?
To allow the...
Well, either way, higher or lower, or,
I suppose any...
She definitely has a hardship. Now, man, that photo she showed, that's a hardship. I mean, somehow we gotta take care of her also, so far, that's gotta be in this.
Well, right, but the ordinance applies citywide as well, so it's, I
Yeah.
understand it's one property owner, but this is ordinance applied across the entire east and west side as well.
And that's where I think, again, we have to be really careful, because we can't do an ordinance for one property as bad as that one property might be. And
These
so
sort
it
of
has to be
issues
something
are,
functional that would work.
right.
too.
These sort of issues are not real easy. I remember a case years ago when I worked down in the mayor's office on Rose Lane, which by coincidence happens to be my district right now, where there's a drop-off going down to a conservancy area where one resident brought in soil and smoothed out his lawn and landscaped it really nice. The guy right next to him planted crown vetch, which is a wild ground cover, and it's used by the state and by along roadways and other things, but it spreads and grows, and one neighbor felt it was unsightly, and the other neighbor purposely planted it there. So it's a tough thing sometimes. I don't think that was ever resolved to the satisfaction of both property owners, but they just had to accept the fact that people have different standards.
In my motion, I don't mean to suggest that we should develop an ordinance for this one specific instance, but I think this is a very good test case of what an ordinance ought to cover, either in the way, either and or in the way it defines hedges, defines overgrowth, uses the phrase living fence, whatever kinds of ways we might get to wrestle with this issue, because none of us would care to live next to that, and it shouldn't happen. So that's my motion.
And I think I'd like to second Commissioner Bremer's motion And also, you know, for staff to check with Madison, like
Yes.
somebody down there said.
Will you repeat what your motion was again, please?
That we refer this back to staff for additional work. And as we're talking, clearly that work should involve checking other cities, including Madison. Also thinking about the definition of hedge, thinking about whether maintenance and overgrowth might be a way of dealing with this. And if so, on what basis? Based on nursery's definitions of what is a proper growth for a particular species or whatever, but clearly it needs some more work.
So we've got a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Yes.
The retroactive still bothers me, so we gotta give that some thought.
Yeah.
Some, clean up that
Yeah.
language,
Yeah.
take care of the existing conditions. She's not the only one, because I've got some friends that are just talking to me about this over on the east side, that neighbor has the same thing. It just lets everything just grow, and this poor lady is stuck, because again, she can't reach up there. She's stuck with hiring people to come and trim these things up. And they just keep growing back. The more you trim them, the more they grow. And it's costing her a fortune to take care of this guy's obnoxious fence is basically what it is. And yeah, that's not good.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Thanks for raising the issue. And for such a good choice of photograph.
Oh, thank you. That was powerful. Item number 4, consideration. Is anybody here for item number 4?
Just me.
Can we move on? Can we move to item number 5 because we do have Mr. Buda.
I'm so excited about it.
I'm sorry.
Are the rest of the people for 5?
Discussion, item number 5, discussion with developers of the University Heights at Berry Creek Development, 2260 University Avenue.
All right, I put this item on the Plan Commission. This is for the redevelopment of the GBS Slide Tackle and Packing site. This is a development project out of the University Avenue corridor, the catalyst site that was identified, and we talked about Velp Avenue and just plans moving forward, and how plans turn into actual projects. I think this is a very good example of that. With that, we have an approved development agreement that was approved by RDA and Council last month. The applicant will be looking to come through Plan Commission for some rezoning, most likely at the July meeting. But with that, it's such a big project and a kind of transformational project, we felt it would be fair to have them present to Plan Commission so that there's an opportunity, 1, to get a little more detail about the project, but 2, if there's any questions or concerns that you think may come up with a rezoning, to get those out now so we can work through those issues before we move through the formal approval process. So with that, Todd Billers is the principal of TMD Properties. I guess if you want to open the floor, be able to turn to him. I think they talked a little bit, there's some info included in your packet, but I think they're also going to bring a presentation that showed a little bit more 3D renderings of some of the things that they're proposing on this site.
Motion open the floor. Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. How you doing today? My name is Todd DeVillers. I'm with RE Commercial, and I'm part of TMD Properties, which owns the University Heights property, along with my partners, Jim and Paul DeLeers. Jim's not here today, and Mark Varish with RE Commercial also could not be here tonight. And that's the ownership team, you know, and I guess I'll get to how our development team came together, but you know, we have DeLeers, Jim LaPlante is our architect, and BMOC is our property management group out of Madison. And Mao and Associates is our engineer, which has, and everyone in this team is kind of, this project's been ongoing for, it seems like 4 or 5 years, nurturing this to get it to this point. And I think it's, large part of, kind of how we got here is kind of the team, so I just wanted to point out everyone's kind of role in how we got here. Can you turn? I want to show you kind of, what the current view is like. Obviously, it's not a pretty sight, and, I grew up on this northeast side, so, I grew up playing in back of this place, so I know the northeast side very well, and I moved away for a while, I've come back, and, but I've seen how that northeast side, back in the day, it was the place to be, and it really took a dip, but, with this, and it's ironic that you're here talking about this Velp Avenue corridor plan, because, the similar, program was laid out for the University Avenue, Brownfield Grand, and it all starts, at that, moment. And, and it does take a long time for these catalyst sites to, and you hope that you pick the right ones, but, we started down that road, the festival, nor this were, even, in anyone's minds. So, that's just a little sampling of, kind of, what's been going on with the site in the northeast side, but, once we came up with this plan, the Brownfield, why don't you turn to the next drawing. This is a little bit of information about, the environmental issues that we were facing with the property. It's about 250,000 square feet on about 33 acres. It's, you've got a gas station on the corner, which, for the most part won't be part of the development, but we will be encroaching on that because we're going to straighten out the interchange, Liebman Court. But most of those environmental issues were asbestos on the walls, insulation, and we're taking care of that. We've got an asbestos abatement program in place, and there's nothing there that I think isn't achievable. We a lot of these were identified in the Brownfield grant, but unfortunately asbestos is not covered in the Brownfield grant, so we're having to tackle that a different way. So after we, why don't you turn to the next page? Can you do one more page, please? Now, this is the Brownfield, redevelopment University Avenue corridor plan. This is kind of what was proposed for that. We took some cues from this, but this was from Stantec, and some of the things that they had envisioned for that corridor. Obviously the festival has changed that dramatically, but it still kind of laid the groundwork for this end of University Avenue. Can you go back one? When we first started down this path, we took a stab at following kind of what the University Avenue corridor plan wanted to see, and we started with the typical multifamily that you're seeing in Green Bay now. In Bellevue, Howard, two-story, front-loading, detached garages, and Kevin said, no go, that he wanted something, bigger and better, something more direct to the plan. So, this is kind of before our team was still kind of forming, so, we, brought on Jim LaPlante, who has a lot of experience in multifamily architecture, Delires, who has a broad spectrum of residential, talent. So, by bringing those together, we came up with, this is actually a plan that the Green Bay Planning Department put together right after the University Brownfield grant, and this is kind of was a plan that we kind of emulated also, when we came up with our plan. If you go to the next one, and this is the development plan that we're proposing for this site. We purchased this in June of 2016. We saw the potential, and in following through what the city wants in this plan, we're taking the risk, because this is not your typical product that you're seeing in Green Bay not right now. This is, we're trying to build it, in a price point, per unit cost that we can still afford, Green Bay rents. We're not downtown Madison, but yet, I still think that there's an underserved market on, this northeast side, especially in Green Bay, for just some better quality, something a little bit different than what they're seeing and what, some of these other communities are getting done. So, we put together the team with Delires, and RE Commercial, Mao, BMOC, and Jim LaPlante. And, so we're, trying to, come up with something that, expands the housing choices while minimizing the competition for the multifamily market, by offering maybe a little higher end product that's out in the marketplace right now. Just to summarize kind of what we have there, as I said, it's 33 acres, and we're doing this in phases. We're probably looking at 48 to 60 months to complete it. The very first phase will be on the east side, the first 3 buildings. And right now, if the total count on the project is 224, I want to call them loft-style apartments. Our typical building is about 16 units. We've got 17 buildings. The 2 back buildings that are near the lake, those are going to be 98 senior style apartments. We're copying a similar project than what's going on in Howard right now, where they're not lofts, because obviously that we just want ground level units, 3 stories, underground parking, elevator. So it's going to have more amenities than probably what we're seeing on that northeast side. But we're seeing competition spring up on a daily basis. So this is not a market that people haven't been looking at, but typically they haven't been looking on the east side for this product. So we try to implement something a little bit different, put together some different product types that we thought would kind of compel the city to move forward and to assist us with this project. A big key of that was getting a developer's agreement in place to get the buildings raised. We thought we put together a good plan. We got the city on board with that developer's agreement. We have a grant to raise the building, so we're looking forward to getting started on that. Subject to the plan getting approved. So, but just to give you a better feel for Jeremy Luke from Delires and Jim LaPlante, our architect, I thought they would come up here and run the show and give you a little more vision as to kind of what is envisioned. I'll take questions after. All right.
Thank you.
So I'm Jim LaPlante. I'm going to take a little bit of Steve, I hope you know Steve Beta as well, take a little bit of his work that he's done as well before we jump into the building. If you go back to those original plans of what the city gave us, right? They gave us 2 different directions. We grabbed most of it. We really did. What we're doing is we're embellishing now, because of course they didn't have a project. They created a plan or an idea. We now developed the project. The main thing you're going to notice, though, is that what they originally started with was a street. They really developed a street, a strong street, a boulevard in those original plans. We took it and we said, no, we're going to invert this concept. We're going to shorten the street. We're going to do our roundabout, and we're going to develop the paths. We're going to develop the connectivity. So we created a pedestrian bike-friendly neighborhood is what we're attempting to do here. Complete inverse, right? Nothing about the street, all about the connectivity and the bikes and the paths. What then happens, of course, is then the drives and the safety access and that type of thing becomes secondary, but it also is still extremely functional. We have brought this to staff as well. We have had security people look at it, and we have tweaked it already under their direction. So safety vehicles are accounted for, but really the point here is that private drives are not the focus. They are everything that's tucked in, and we'll get back at how that happens also when we look at the buildings. So then the next thing, this is not a flat site, right? When you saw that picture, you saw the opportunity of this horrendous building, of course, up there, perched on this hill. The hill had to be thought of as an opportunity. So how do we embellish the hill? And numerous hills, quite honestly. There's different levels and plateaus in the site. So we had to create also a building that adapted easily to a hilly site. So we weren't given anything that was going to be dropped down here from other sites. That's the bottom line, okay? But the bottom line is we still had, with now our inverse thinking of how do we develop paths, bike trails, connectivity, those just inherently gave us view corridors. So it really works fabulously in our advantage. But then the last thing is then when we finally get to building, the buildings really had to take advantage of the architectural impact of this 40-foot hill. And we've done that as well. So when we finally get to my buildings, I gotta give my developers a little bit of credit here. I hope you realize the risk. I mean, he already mentioned the word, but I hope you realize the risk. He's now creating a new product, okay? I'm an architect, I'm saying, okay, I'm in, right? I mean, this is what I live for. How many developers give me this opportunity? So I have to give them the credit for stepping up and saying, hey, we're going to do something different. We're going to do something that's powerful. We're going to do all of these things that truly take advantage. And I don't want to use exploit in the wrong term here, but honestly, that's what we're doing. We're exploiting a very cool asset out here. And this whole site is wrapped around by a parkway, and then all these trails and all these other things that are working in it. How do we not do this? So, what the building ends up being is experimental. We're creating very imaginative spaces inside our building. We're not even getting to that part yet inside the building, but we clearly are utilizing the site, and I hope we're maximizing it to the potential that truly planning hopefully saw 8-10 years ago. I mean, I realize how long these plans have been in effect. So, our team. What did we have to do then with all of that information, all of that neat stuff? We had to still create buildable buildings at the end of the day. We still have to create something that's going to be cost sensitive, market sensitive, still has to have clear load paths when I'm the architect and trying to design something that has all these bumps and jogs, but yet I can bring it down to the ground, simply and safely. And thermal envelope. I'm going to develop here a building. You notice how I say I? Sorry, I take credit for a lot of things that I do not do. But the thermal envelope is going to be far better than a standard code in building. And why do we do that? Because that's obviously going to save ourselves money at the long run. I mean, let's be realistic, let alone it's a better building. Environmental impact is now where we're starting to get to. Even the next step of we're even looking at HVAC and doing hybrid, better, extremely high-end HVAC, heating and cooling. What we're proposing is the Magic Pack is a brand name, but that style of an HVAC unit where you get a ducted system. It's not just a through-wall unit. It's not a single boiler that tries to heat things evenly and never does. I mean, they're actually putting in individual units in every single unit. Very high-end. So that's the opportunities. That's all of the things we've attempted to address. The bottom line is that we're still creating a building that looks urban, built into a hillside, uses the terrain for architectural impact, clearly looks different than other buildings. I think we did find some inspiration from other buildings around the state and clearly across the country, but I think it really does lend itself to our site. If you notice, it's still a very narrow building. It's not actually a tall building at all. It's 3 stories on the one side, 2 stories on the other side, or sloping again because it's in hillsides, but this is not a big building. And that is another clear thing we're trying to do, is we're not just throwing multiple 50-unit buildings or whatever you want to say, big buildings. We're not throwing big buildings at this site. We think the real goal here was to fit in to our hillside. So it's the narrowness of the building does force, though, a cost, because it is a single loaded corridor building. Now that's cool in many ways, right? So as you're going down the corridor, you have windows on the outside of this corridor inside your building. Well, that's fantastic if you think of, we've all been in the hotels, some of us have been in some of the larger apartment buildings where that corridor is just horrible. You know, it's deadly, it's just impossible to get past, and that's how you relate to your building. That's the first thing as any of your guests come up to it. Guess what? We've done a single loaded corridor. That impacts the cost because then the corridor is twice as big per how many units, right? But we're going out on a limb here. We're really thinking that this is still the right product, again, because it is where we are attempting to be experimental. But how do we solve then our own problem? Well, we only have one corridor for 2 floors. They're lofts. Still keeping the building with then modern low-pitch shed roofs, decks. That's probably the next most important thing that we wanted to add and talk about. They're large. They have partial coverings. They really are the look of the building. When we get back to the exterior of the building, you're going to see that they're often framed in metal panel is what they are, in different colors of metal panel. This is just a building. We're going to get you for your official or for the real presentation next time, color renderings. And so you'll see that there's actually 3 different options of colors in our building groupings. Oh, how about this just for some of the last items inside our building? 2-story spaces, right? These are lofts, so we actually have some pretty funky spaces. We have very flexible kitchens is the idea here. So the kitchen wall is basically a single wall. We have a pantry, but then the little island piece, if you happen to see it, is movable. So it's movable, it floats, it's on skis. You can actually then put it off to the wall, use it as a stand-up counter. You can bring it over to you by the sink as it may be. I mean, it's flexible, that's the point of it. Kind of cool, kind of neat. We actually got this idea right from the Delirious gang, and they used it in their student housing, and they said it was fantastically successful. That's my presentation. That's the building, at least. Excuse me? Yeah.
You ended it with a bang, too, my gosh.
How about if I allow Steve then, because of course I tried to use too much of his time on talking about the site, but let Steve talk about the site a little bit more.
Yeah, I won't dig into the, Steve Bede with Mao and Associates. I've been working with these guys for quite a few years now on this site, and I've personally been doing this almost 30 years. Working with a lot of multifamily projects. This is very unique to Green Bay, I would say. From a multifamily standpoint, it's something different that you probably haven't seen. Everybody traditionally in Green Bay builds 2 stories, 10 units, 12 units. Typically what I see though in the projects that we do, you're going to usually see around 9 to 10 units an acre. Even though this site is more compact from the standpoint of where our units actually are, this site actually equates out to right around 9 to 10 units an acre. It's kind of very similar density. It's not a high density by any means. We do have some taller units, as Jim mentioned, from the standpoint of 2.5 stories, which are very unique with the garages underneath. Again, really neat. The cool part of all this, we're connected to the Berry Creek Trail system. We believe is going to be a huge draw. You know, there's a lot of people that love walking, biking, and all those other things. So part of the concept was here, as was mentioned, as the trail, the connecting trails, the walkability, the rideability with your bikes, and all those other things, all great amenities to this site. The other big point about this site is we're pushing about 60% green space the way this site is designed. So we're up a little bit higher with some of our units, but it allows us to get more green space numbers into our site, which is huge. Typically, when I've designed these sites, you know, you usually end up around 40%. A lot of people want to see 50%, so you try and push for your 50% green spaces. But 40 to 50% is pretty typical, and it's a very spacious site actually at 40 to 50% green space. When you start pushing 60%, as you can see from this, you know, our green spaces are on the exterior, though they're not all on the interior, you know, just because the terrain and all the things we're trying to accomplish with the site. So, unless you have questions of me, or I'm sure you will of the rest of the group, that's what I have. Yes?
What's the lake, is that like a wading pool?
No, the site is, that picture doesn't really do it justice. If you ever driven by on University Avenue and you look at this, there's this monument up there right now. That building up there just stands so tall and it's huge. The site is actually is broken kind of I'll call it 1/3, 2/3 as far as their drainage pattern.
Oh.
We have a stormwater management pond, so you see
Oh, okay.
two stormwater management ponds. There's a large one which is located kind of in the southeast corner where Jeremy's pointing up here, and then there's gonna be a smaller one up front to handle the rest of the, maybe like 30% of the
That's
site.
about an acre, it's about 3 acres approximately.
Yeah, so the back one is actually a very large water feature. That'll obviously be overlooked by our, one of the 40-unit buildings or 49-unit buildings in the future that we'll build. So it's actually a pretty neat amenity for that unit too. Okay, yes,
Could you continue with the units?
yes.
So we've got the two 49-unit ones that are kind of the curved ones at the back that
Yep.
would be designed for seniors because they
Correct.
would have the elevators going up
Correct.
and the garages.
Yeah, they would have attached parking and parking underneath. There's actually a garage under the whole thing. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think that building's totally designed yet, but this is a concept that we pulled
Right.
from another site. But-
Understood.
Mhm.
And how about the others? How many units do we have in
Sure.
each one of those?
In
Skinny
phase
ones.
one, Jeremy, if you want to point to one of them, that's probably the first building or
16.
couple buildings that are going to be built right there. Those are 16-unit buildings. The way the building is designed by the guys, some of the other buildings can go up to 22 units. It just depends on whether we use the lower level and then how they mix up their 1 and 2 bedroom units inside there. So they can accommodate different numbers of units. But for the most part, the majority of them are 16-unit buildings. And they all have an attached garage to them. Some of them have detached garages, but they're kind of, that's why you see, Jeremy's pointing to the individual garages. Some are attached garages right to the unit. Some people will park in the detached garage, and then they'll have an exterior entrance to get to their unit.
Part of the reason for my question, I'm looking at the dealer's final page here that includes building statistics and the 249 units I can find. Then we've got 16-unit urban lofts, 16-unit walk-up flats, 22-unit combination of the lofts and flats, 26-unit combination, and I got totally confused as to how many units we're talking
Sure.
about when you put it all
The
together.
whole thing is 322 units. If you'd
Okay,
add up all those units that
322.
you see on our site. I'll let Jim and Jeremy kind of point out how the buildings are kind of set up.
Are the garages one per person?
Oh, no, there's quite a few more than one
So
per
there's
person.
extra garages
Yes.
available?
Yep.
For people that have 3 cars? Okay.
Well, so is the stuff, but it really comes down to the clutter and us managing that the site stays very neat.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. It's not about how many cars anymore. We're actually talking about EV stations, and, I mean, we're looking extraordinarily progressively at this. So we're not looking at just everybody having 2 cars by any means. We actually think there's going to be far fewer cars in most sites.
And our garages are deeper, and, we have the bike trail, so some of those are gonna be
Yeah.
used for bike storage, something, accessible, so someone's not putting that in their apartment, but,
Right, the garages are, instead of just being 21, 22 feet deep, are 25 to 29 feet
Great,
deep,
okay.
assuming we have, again, the bikes, the toys, that type of thing. But I don't want to miss the original question over here. Part of the confusion may be, well, hopefully you can see
We
these
had
little
that
tiny
original
numbers.
site plan, which was smaller.
They're teeny weeny, so she can see them, we can get her back on track. But here's still the bottom line of what I want to make sure that you realize when you say, well, why are there all of these different styles of buildings? Flexibility. We're doing we're doing multiple things, right? We have a building that's extremely flexible into our hillsides, so wherever the grade lands it, then we're going to build up and, get type thing. Bottom line also, we have unit flexibility. So we're going to keep building which building is renting better at the time, and that building then is the next one that goes up. We have a ton of flexibility in that exact same footprint. So we really have inherently created something that is just absolutely destined to work.
Wonderful. And then, when we're talking about the number of sites here, this is apart from that brown
Yes.
future site area, right?
Correct.
Future development area, which might or might not happen, depending on how well.
Well, they're
we own
developers,
it.
so, yeah.
We own it, and that road will be a road that, will be accessible but, it's temporary in the fact that, if a big commercial project comes and the commercial land up front want to add that land together and do something special, we didn't want to have to tear out a brand-new road. But we'll put it to the back of the property, but, if the person up front, develops a grocery store or whatever on the front and doesn't need us, then are we really still commercial? But then I'd probably, maybe a CBRF or a memory care type facility play, I think, and then that road may not be best suited to be on the backside, it might be down the middle of the site. So we just want the flexibility, to call that a road in transition.
Thank you.
I think just, from a planning perspective, one of the things, just look for safety and ingress, egress. It's a balance that the redevelopment authority wanted to see that area reserved for potential future development because it could be assembled with the front parcel.
Yes.
But when such time comes or whatever happens, in the meantime, there should be at least a minimal temporary access so that there's more than one way in and out of there, just so fire, police. And again, because this is being built in phases, and I think the second page of the memo outlines just kind of the numbers that come in. But really that access, that secondary access isn't going to be needed until we start to get up to phase 3 and 4 and we get those additional units in there. For phase 1, that Liebman Court extension can fully service what's there. It's just, as this thing grows and as this evolves, we want to just make sure that, look, there is going to be that access issue.
That's Rothy Street next door.
Yes, yes. And then you mentioned the flexibility, which I very much appreciate, because I served on the University Avenue Task Force, and we were thinking of what is now at the bottom of the screen there, the senior apartments, what you're identifying as senior apartments, as being somewhat more upscale because of their view over Bear Creek, right?
There's no question, they're placed very specifically.
Yeah. And then we were talking about particularly taking advantage of student needs in the lower level areas. So what kinds of clientele are you thinking of as you're developing this?
Well, I think the clientele is, we'll have that senior factor, but I think that what we're hearing from the marketplace on a national basis is that, seniors and, like that commingling of ages, and they don't want to be in an all senior environment so, we want to take advantage of that, but yet, I don't think too many people 75 years old are going to want to walk lofts, but, if they want to, great, but I think that's more, I don't want to say that millennial and kill that word to death, but, that 16-unit building has, the garage is on the ground level. On the ground level, we have 2, one-level units. I think those are going to probably be real attractive to the seniors, because they'll have direct access to the garages. On the second floor, we only have that one load corridor, which only means one hallway, and then when you get into the units, they have a stairwell, which, make them lofts. If we find that that's not working, we'll go with instead of doing that third floor as lofts, we'll just put another hallway in and make all the units, one level, if we find that the loft unit, but from what we're hearing, in the market, those lofts, we get a lot of bang for the buck because of their size. We're probably pushing 1,000 square feet on the units, and some of those are, they're going to be priced, a little bit more aggressive than some of the other things you're seeing in the marketplace, for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. I think, we're still able to hit some nice price points to, pay for the costs that we're, adding to build the nicer product. So, that's, we're hoping that's the case, but we've done a lot of research and we think that is the case.
Pricing more aggressive means higher?
Yes. We understand there's a ceiling to everything, and definitely in the apartment market, there's a lot of good competition, and but I think if you offer something that isn't being offered, and especially on this northeast side, because I think that with the VA clinic, the university, there's a lot of professionals on this northeast side that right now, are going elsewhere. So.
We haven't given credit to one of our other team members, BMOC. If you notice that in your original sheets, they are the marketing factor of this, and they are also guiding us and guiding where our unit counts and our unit mixes, what should be the amenities, that type of thing. I guess, do we want to dare get into all the amenities and all the different things that we're even offering?
Right now, just a lot of ideas, but, we're
True.
going to have a lot of amenities, that, the
And
site.
that would differ depending on the price points, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
Well, the amenities would be for the entire development, it doesn't
Oh.
matter which unit you live in. You'll have the lake there, we're thinking of making a beach on the lake, you'll, what do you call those squash courts, or right now, pickleball courts are being real popular, and,
The
we're
box
gonna,
gardens.
yeah, we have gardens, fenced-in gardens with water, take advantage of that. And then bocce ball, and we've got these things in our mind, and we got them penciled on the site plan, but we just aren't sure exactly where those all lay out exactly.
And of course, this is a hilly site, so you can't just pencil it in the
Yeah.
bigger green space. That really doesn't work when the hill is.
You bet. Thank you.
One other thing on BMOC, BMOC is also a professional management firm. They're also the management firm that is managing the dorms that we put up on the west side by NWTC, and they have a lot of beds under management. Just want to point that out from a standpoint, it is our intent to keep this site nice, clean, well-managed, and that's why we picked a firm that has a lot of experience.
This being in my district, obviously, I have a lot of interest in it, and I want to see the finest quality housing that we're going to find in the city of Green Bay, and that's my goal. I think there are a lot of positive things here, I like the fact that it's being done in phases. So, instead of just putting up, that many units and hope that they sell, there's a flexibility here.
Right.
Based on, you do the first phase, you see how they sell, you see what's popular. You look at amenities that the tenants want, and, you can adapt the other phases accordingly. I also see on the east side a lot of people selling their single-family homes as they get older and wanting to move into quality apartments, really with the intention of staying there the rest of their lives. And, the goal here by offering, the different type of apartments is, you might have a loft, and then as you get older, you may need the amenities that the senior apartments offer. So, you can kind of make it your home for a long period of time. I think one of the big questions that people had, we had a certain amount of controversy or opposition to this, and people are always afraid of something new coming in, not knowing what it's going to be, not knowing how it's going to affect the neighborhoods or the existing housing, and all of that. But one of the biggest concerns was traffic, and it didn't seem to me, looking at complexes like this, that they really have tremendous traffic impacts. Am I thinking correctly on that, or
Yes.
what is your experience on that?
A couple of things. First of all, traffic is a concern of every single multifamily project I've ever done. Everyone's worried about the traffic. Whenever they see a single-family development, they're concerned about traffic. Roads are designed to handle people, and they're designed to handle cars. University Avenue, this corridor, it's a busy corridor. And that's part of the reason why we have two different access points that we've been discussing with city planning and your traffic engineers, trying to figure out, okay, how can we make this work, and what traffic studies need to be done to make sure that we're accomplishing all those goals with the access points we have. We did a project over on the east side of Green Bay, the west side of Green Bay. We have 320 units on one site. It's a single access site, cul-de-sac. We did traffic studies or traffic analysis prior to us doing that project, and then after we did it, we personally, my company did traffic counts on that just to see how that traffic spread out throughout the day. You'd be very surprised to see that not everybody gets up at 6 o'clock, leaves at 7 o'clock to go to work. They don't all leave at that time. If you would sit here for a minute and count the one car that would come by, that's how if we sit here and just sit here in the quiet for 1 minute, you'd be surprised how long 1 minute is. It's amazing. but we counted that traffic at the peak times. On Wednesdays, the peak time in the morning and the afternoon, and that traffic is spread out all day long. When you have people that live in apartments, there's seniors, there's 20 years old, 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old. The cross-section is, college students, there's seniors, there's the whole gamut. And they all come and go at different times. They have night jobs, they have day jobs, and different after-school jobs. And so the cross-section of when those people come and go is spread out through the whole day. It's not a 7 o'clock and 5 o'clock type of thing. It doesn't happen with an apartment site. So we were very surprised when we did that other project. That project is up and functioning, and I drive by that intersection every single day to and from work, and you very rarely ever see more than a car sitting there waiting for me to go past so he can turn out. It just doesn't happen. So the city is looking at, I shared that analysis with your city planning department, and they're also looking at how whether they're gonna require an additional traffic study to figure out how this is all gonna happen. But the nice thing we have with this situation is we have the ability, if our one single access point is just too much for that University Avenue traffic load, we can have the second access over to Rotary Street, and anybody heading to the west can take Rotary and then get to a controlled intersection potentially to get back out into the city, whatever way they wanna go. So I don't foresee there being a problem. There will be a traffic study done, but you'd be surprised at how many cars you really have to have coming through an intersection before you go to, everybody says roundabout, before you put a roundabout or a stoplight at that intersection. That's probably not gonna happen.
You think that the traffic controls that have been put in with the festival development, that will probably be adequate traffic controls?
Yeah.
To support your development?
For example, the one site I'm referring to, and there's even another single-family residential site that I did some work on over in Ledgeview, County Highway X, where they're getting, just to give you an example of traffic, some people just don't understand that. A 2-lane road, one way each way, those lanes are usually 11, 12 feet wide, okay? And that particular street, they got up to, GV, where GV is south of 172. If you remember, that was 2 lanes. Well, it took up to 13, almost 14,000 cars a day going through there before they went to a 4-lane road. On our project that we did, University's already a 4-lane road right there, I believe. But in that instance, that was only a 2-lane road, 14,000 cars a day before they went to a 4-lane road. So it takes an immense amount of traffic or additional traffic to change what we need to do at these intersections. Worst case scenario, you can always add a right turn lane to alleviate people going in and out of this site. It helps a ton just by putting a right turn lane leaving this site, so you don't get people stacking up. But in that instance, we just left our development on a single access road, stopped at a stop sign. The other road is County Highway C or Shawano Avenue. They kept going east and west, and you just left when you needed to. And it hadn't been really a problem.
Now, these are all rentals, correct? Okay. So this seems to be quite a departure from what the city's been doing. I know that everything that I've been hearing for years has been no more apartments in Green Bay, no more apartments in Green Bay. And I know these are really nice apartments, but they're still rental units. And I wondered why all apartments when, for example, there's the place is it Hobart, where they're having the mixed single family plus condos plus apartments.
Yep.
So why all rentals here?
You want my opinion?
Well, Jim, you want me to ask, because this is a conversation that we've had since day one. Our project, when we were going through the approval process for the RDA and Common Council, ownership would be, condos or another, matter of that, and, the density that we would lose, by putting, say, condos on top of the hill at, 300,000, we need to be hitting that kind of price point, and Delires ran some numbers, as say, if we laid this out as condos, creating a condo association and putting, some kind of a multifamily component, mixed in with that, I don't believe you would be successful in selling those condos.
Basically, the size isn't big enough to support the different types of uses.
Even though we have 30 acres, the topography, has limitations to, we have 2 plateaus. And, let's say you did, condos on one side and apartments down here, to make that sizable of investment, And, the condo would just, create, a lot more risk than, I think we're willing to take.
To help out a little bit there, we're working on another project of condos. And you only misspoke a little bit.
Okay.
Condos are to get them done well, and what we would have proposed here are $500,000, by the way.
Okay.
So where it falls apart is that they would have ended up in our senior spot. So how do we do $500,000 condos? Because, I mean, this is a spectacular site. It's, I mean, so we're not trying to undervalue by any means. We thought about this at length. But it just could never work itself out that once we've enveloped this part of the site with these condos, $500,000 condos, how does this ever work? Are we driving through the rentals? Are we driving through? So we just said, no, we're doing this wrong. We need to do this site well in apartments. Now, so here's the next step. I mean, it's a valid question. The only thing that you may be, again, so I corrected him because I think he misspoke slightly there. I think you might be mistaken slightly here. I think the demand is even underserved with this many units. I think the demand of apartments are just dramatically increasing.
And I'm not actually talking about demand, I'm talking about the city's stance on apartments recently.
Ah, okay, well, and I don't know that.
But I will say that the plan that we have been following have been the recommendations of Stantec, your consultant, and the Green Bay Planning Department, which, gave us the, the vision and then told us to go create it, so, and there was, an apartment component of like 240 units in that drawing, and I guess, we have thought through the home ownership condo situation, thoroughly, and, the assessment that we could create and the number of units we create would be diminished dramatically, and, it's just more bang for the buck, and that's part it boils down to.
Well, I think that you're really doing a beautiful job here. My question for the city then would be, why are apartments okay now when a few years ago they were not okay? Because I do know of at least one development that was turned down because they were apartments rather than condos. And I know that getting loans for condos has been very difficult. Getting loans for apartments has been easier, but I do know that this particular development was turned down because they were rentals and not condos. So that would be my question. Why is this one okay now?
I can answer for that.
Okay.
Do you guys know a specific project?
It would have been over next to Autumn's Promise.
Okay. Was it before my time?
I believe it was.
Okay, then I'll take responsibility for the change in direction.
Smart road or somewhere over there.
Yeah, so I think a few things, and Mr. DeVillers and Mr. Plant, talked about some of these things. One, I think in terms of use of the site, I think one of the things that we regulate in terms of form and density, when you add all the numbers up, this does not become that much more of a dense site than, basically some of our traditional neighborhoods. That 8 to 10 units an acre, that fits in very well in terms of it's a good density, but it's not overwhelming in terms of we're shoving a lot into one space. I think in addition to that, one of the things that we have pushed the developer on is, how do we add and diversify our housing stock? And whether that's a rental unit or whether that's an owner-occupied unit, we need to keep pushing the envelope on what we offer here in the city. And I think for a long time, we offered great single-family houses, and we offered like 12-plex, standard as you've seen, but not a lot in between. And so I think they've come forward, and I think, just from a staff perspective, we've been pleased of how they've continued to push forward in terms of our response for those demands. The other, in terms of just the rental versus ownership, we have to be cognizant of the market. And the market for the foreseeable future is people are renting. We can say that we want home ownership, and yeah, I agree. There's social benefits that come with home ownership, but people are not buying like they used to be in generations past. And it goes, I guess, both ends of the spectrum. It's both for, you know, the quote-unquote millennials who just are delaying home ownership, but it's also coming at the other end of people who are retiring and like, look, I want to be flexible and I don't want to be tied down to my home anymore. You know, and there's a whole host of reasons for that. Look, you know, moving forward, we did push the issue on home ownership on this one. I think this area, for what it's worth, I mean, because of all the multifamily around there, it also, you know, making this an island of home ownership and a bunch of rentals is harder in itself. I think also just given the site constraints in terms of like mixing the uses, the way the topography is to get to the spots where you want the home ownership, it's not quite the layout. You know, normally you'd want the layout a little bit differently to make those things mix well. But then also just from our own city market studies that we've done, I mean, there is a significant demand for rental units and market rate rental units in this community. And look, I mean, the developer wouldn't be going forward if they didn't feel there was a market. So with that, we felt, look, if these are going to be rental units, then we need to push them in terms of design, and we need to push them in terms of rents, so that we're setting the bar higher. So I think, you know, in terms of, you know, those pieces, and then going back into fitting in with the planning process of, look, you know, taking the project, I think we're all in consensus that there's going to be some type of residential layout. But given now kind of the market realities, we feel like, look, this is a good mix. And I think with that, you know, even though it is rental, it's something that we don't have in our marketplace right now. And I think that's what's going to, again, that was our argument. I mean, that's what warranted it. In addition from the environmental remediation part of it, I mean, that's what warranted city investment in this. It was pushing this further than something that had been done before.
I learned in my own district that not all rental properties are created alike. And that's like, you know, I think that there are certain rental properties that have created stereotypes of better. But, you know, if there ever was a site in the city of Green Bay for, you know, higher quality apartments, what was proposed here, it's this site, I think. It's a very unique site. You're not going to find this anywhere else in the city. You can cite anywhere comparable to this.
The other thing too, that this development here is, boy, what a development. You guys have done your homework really well. I'm impressed. We do need high-end apartments. And the thrust of the city that parallels that is our own mayor and our staff are looking for professional people to stay in Green Bay. And there's also a lot of people that come here. We have a hell of a good college, and there's some people that go to college that are professors, maybe extending their education, and they need a nice place to live. And I think you guys are really good at it. I think you're just, I love it. It's the best thing I think I've seen in 10 years. And yeah, you're right, we were frowning on rental properties and all that, but this is just not a rental property.
Right.
This is a property.
Thank you.
I think that it will be really fabulous to see that property demolished.
That site is unbelievable up there. I'm so glad to see what you guys are doing with it. You're not wrecking it, you're working into it, and you're feeding into it. And, well, you got a hell of a team here together. You're all working in the same direction.
Thank you.
Doing a hell of a
And, you know, this is more or less a courtesy of just getting you up to speed, because it is such a mammoth property and project. But, you know, we hope to come back, you know, in July, and, you know, and during that period, you know, of informational gathering, getting comfortable, I welcome you. If, you know, sometimes it's locked, sometimes it's not, but if you want to get through there and drive around it, you know, you can just, it's a bunch of old industrial buildings now, but give you a vision of when you get on top of that hill, looking back on the backside of Baird's Creek and the views that they'll have. And these buildings also take advantage, because all of our decks are really on the one side, most of our decks are on the one side of the building, so we're, you know, and this picture doesn't do justice as far as showing the topography elevation changes, you know, but, you know, even if you, it's a lot steeper than that, I believe.
I guess another reason why I'm so excited is I did drive up there.
Oh, you did? Good.
And turned around in that parking lot, and I looked at that view of the bay and the surrounding territory, and I thought, I hope nobody bastardizes this damn thing with something, and boy, you're far from that. You guys are, you did your homework and you're doing really well.
exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the seed was planted with the Catalyst, project, that's for sure. So.
I think if we get things lined up, applicant will be coming through for a rezoning. I think the initial proposal was to straight rezone for R3. Is that correct? Right. With that, I think some of the things in terms of other, I guess things about design and construction, all those types of things have been addressed in the development agreement, and that the redevelopment authority will be responsible for approving, the conceptual site plan and construction documents moving along. So that, in essence, kind of takes the place of a PUD where you might have some of these more specific things outlined in there. So if you want, I can also share the full development agreement with you if you want to look through and just see some of those things that are covered in there. We felt the straight rezoning would probably be the best path forward. And I think, given this informational session, I think we'll be on track to come back at the July meeting for the formal approvals.
The other thing we did too is an extensive work on that University corridor, and I was with that group also, and boy, I'll tell you, you're just enhancing everything that we worked so hard to get.
Yeah, Todd served on the advisory committee for the corridor, so, I think as the process was going through, he kind of thought about that site.
Oh, yeah.
What can you do with it, so it isn't a concept that just came up with, they came up with overnight.
Oh, I thought they just came up with a plan.
These guys I actually represented JBS, and we were trying to sell that, and but the building had fallen in such disrepair that it no longer was a functioning, building unless you really put a lot of money into it for an industrial purpose. And it's either you go that route or you change direction. So I'm just happy to say that I think this was time well spent. So
Yep.
Great.
The people who are going to live up there are going to be very fortunate.
Feel free to reach out to me if any more questions arise, but thank you for your time.
Onward.
Thank you.
Sorry you kept you waiting so long.
No action will be taken at this moment.
Just information.
Stephanie, thank you for being so patient.
Of course, I love it.
Really exciting.
Item number 4, consideration of possible action on the request to vacate an alley between Pine Street and Cherry Street submitted by Whitney School Development LLC.
Thank you. Computer.
This is another one that's long overdue.
So this is for the Whitney School site. We do not have a formal site plan for this development yet, but we wanted to do the first step, which is going to be to vacate an alley, which is primarily unused at this point. So just to be familiar, this is North Webster and Van Buren. Pine Whitney Park is just to the north. What they're looking at doing is redevelopment of Whitney School into apartments. They are filing for historic tax credits. They got state approval and waiting for national approval at this point. So that's what they'll be doing with the front buildings here. They will be doing townhomes around the perimeter of the property, which requires this alley to be vacated. Right now, there is storm sewer that's in the alley, which would become their responsibility once it is vacated. The only other affected property owner is a single-family home here, and they will be an easement covering this portion of the property, so that way she still maintains access to her driveway and to her garage. Beyond that, nobody else is affected. Even if this project were to not go through, the city does not need this alley, and we can replace it if we need to, but quite honestly, everything else is just owned by one property owner, and the alley is really unnecessary at this point. So we are recommending approval with some conditions from DPW, just as far as filing that easement and making sure that the responsibility of the storm sewer does get put onto the new ownership.
Well, one less alley to plow and maintain.
Yes.
Is the church going to remain?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Motion approved.
Second.
Thanks for hanging in there, Stephanie.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Spent a lot of time over at Whitney School. Oh, yeah. Tell them they just have their workout area.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the alley was always useless.
Yeah.
There used to not, there hasn't been a.
No council meeting, so nothing to report.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Kevin and.
Well, that's up late to see it.
Oh, yeah.